survivors, and welcome to Tier Death Experience, the first day spray show where we rank various aspects of survival horror. In this episode, following up on our discussion about Resident Evil's Hunters, we have to do the other big BOW, which is, of course, Tyrants. Long awaited. This has been on the list of things to do since the show began. We're going to go through every Tyrant, canonically speaking, I think it's fair to say, and, rank them, basically, straightforward. Starting with the boy, Resident Evil 0, the proto-tyrant, T-001, one of two tyrants created by Umbrella around this time, and deemed by Umbrella as a failure, which is why it's kind of just dumped, basically in the waste disposal areas between laboratories. Steve, well, I know show and sort of feelings on this, but where do you land on the proto-tyrant?
A flawed, failed prototype. I kind of love it. It's rubbish to fight in Zero and Umbrella Chronicles, but the concept of a knackered, busted version of a tyrant, it's like the prototype's a Ford Model T that's rusted compared to like a Camaro or something. It's really good. I like it.
That's not the comparison I'm expecting, but yes, I totally see where you come from. There is a charm about its rubbishness, isn't there, Sherwin?
This is like the Danny Glover of Tyrants. It's just knackered when it turns up. It is just too old. And it just, I love this Tyrant. For me, this is S tier all the way. Because it's the stuff that pure horror is made of. It's what a Tyrant should be. It's scary because, it has the kind of irrational tick stuff. It moves, the way it appears in front of you. It's absolute horror, nightmare fuel stuff.
It's. I'm sorry. Go on.
This is what makes it work. I think. It is literally unlike other elements where they're almost too polished, and you can almost forget that they were originally, human or an experiment or something that's been grown in a lab. Whatever way you want to approach it, they just feel very polished. They're an iPod. This thing is painfully analog. This thing is just, it's got all the hallmarks of just research dismay, and it lurches through life trying to make it through, even though it's hideously deformed and not really fit for purpose. I like it.
It's I really love the artwork for it. I have to say that's always stuck with me. It's hideously grotesque in its own way. Unlike the T-002, it's sort of green and sickly, and it's covered in all these bumps, much like the Hunter Beta. Actually, it looks pretty messed up. It looks abandoned. It looks like it's had random chemicals just dropped on it, like nobody gave a crap. Yeah, got to feel sorry for it. It attempts to persevere until it can no longer. I really like it as well. I don't know if I'd put it in S though. That's that's
a bold statement.
A consistently enjoyed Tyrant by us that's actually a bit crap to fight. I'm going to argue for a B as a baseline because it's not offensive. It's just a bit rubbish.
Okay,
that's in a mechanical sense, not a thematical sense. Thematically, that's different.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that in the sense that it's kind of, as you said, Joe, and it's interesting because of its sort of erratic nature and the way that it moves. It makes it stand out a little bit. I would probably charitably give it an A to be democratic and put it right in the middle. Does that sound fair?
Well, that works because I go S, Steve goes B, you go A, and then we put it in the middle at A. I think this is almost one of the Tyrants, to be fair. Like, obviously, as with all tier lists, you come back and you revisit them and see where you get to. This one might be there because it almost feels like an outlier in the grand scheme of things. So,
totally. Okay, so let's look at its sibling then, the T-002 from the original 1996 Resident Evil, the classic Tyrant. This is an interesting one. It's, our first interaction with the creature in any fashion. Sherwin, how do you feel about classic Tyrant?
Ultimately, it's the definitive Tyrant. For me, it's that first time you ever encountered one. It's that first vision of just the horrors of what Umbrella have made. It's, it's outside of the video game experience. If you can look at it from a lore perspective, this is just this is literally just what Umbrella's vision is realized. And I think for that alone, that makes this probably the definitive Tyrant for me. Now, obviously, I know it's difficult because we're going to talk about, we have to go back to video game land because we talked about the original, right? If you're gonna look at this, it's kind of scary. The only downside about it is it stands perfectly still to attention when you're shooting with a missile. And that's literally about the only downside I can really say for it. Like, it's excellent. It's just, for me, this is the definitive, this is the Tyrant.
It is interesting. It's the ultimate life form or whatever, but it has a giant thumping weak point in its chest. It's just like, look at me, here I am. Here's my exposed heart. So I never really got that personally, but I mean, it's certainly scary, and it's obviously a great finale to the original. But as you say, that first boss fight, not so much. The second boss fight, better until it just stops in its tracks, certainly. Steve, how do you feel about classic Tyrant?
So it shares lore with Remake Tyrant, so they're both going to get good points there. I think it's right. As the cornerstone of the idea of ultimate bioweapon project thing, it's pretty solid, you know. I like how bulky it looks compared to its future, like its successors. It's a much more buff and bulky, especially. I mean, its PS1 graphics are probably helping it there, but it's like massive chest and shoulders, and it's bulky. Its first boss fight is crap. But I think also the remake's first boss fight is also crap.
It is.
So that balances out. I actually really dig they've got an effect on the PS. This is getting into the nitty-gritty, sorry, everybody. But there's an effect on the PS1 version where the claw has like an inner claw pulsing in and out, which is red, which only really appears when you've been hit to make that look a blood-stained effect. And I kind of really dig that, and I like the little tracing effect when it swipes. Mechanically, it's not so amazing, but visually, it's actually okay for the time. Yeah. So, as a baseline for the ultimate bioweapon, I'll put this in A. What's all?
The part that nobody knows is that's Steve's impression of everybody else in the world of our normal voices.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement. It's definitely top of A at the very least.
Yeah, sure. Let's put it there again. It's a good baseline. You can't say that. You can't say the thing is the best, and then everything else has to be measured by it, right? So.
Right, exactly. And these are all subject to change, so we'll see what happens. Yes, as we've just mentioned, the remake equivalent of the very same beast, the T-002. What does it do differently that makes it stand out? Obviously, it has the advantage of nicer graphics. That's certainly a thing. And I will say, despite the number of times I do it, there is something always very tense about that final boss fight with Remake Tyrant, the way that it sprints around and stuff like that, the way that it grabs other characters, because you can have Barry die on the rooftop and change your entire ending right at the end of the game, and I love that part of it. But yeah, there is a forcefulness with Remake Tyrant that original Tyrant has lost a little bit for me, sort of lost a little bit of its impact probably by virtue of being improved upon by technology, basically. Sherwin, how do you feel about Remake Tyrant?
Yeah, it's got it feels more agile, doesn't it? Is the best way to describe it.
Yes.
I think I echo what Steve says, though. It's slightly less imposing. It's got that little bit more of a sort of slouch shoulder kind of vibe to it. It looks a little bit it just looks like a giant human, whereas the original is giant human that was also the Rock once upon a time. It's got that kind of did not skip shoulder day, and I think that's what it is. That's the difference for me. Bearing in mind they share the same lore and they're essentially the same creature. This one lands probably behind the original, but ahead again of Prototype because it is the refined version of it. It's no less scary for that. Interesting,
Steve. Behind the original Tyrant.
You see, this Tyrant's more unique than I want to give it credit for, in that it's, besides Hypnos, it's probably the most athletic looking. All the rest become bodybuilders, not quite to the degree of the original Tyrant, but they are all buff as fuck.
Yeah.
So I kind of give it that. But I think for me, the thing that makes this Tyrant much more imposing, even though it's mechanically not that much different, is the heartbeat sound. And the general, the sound design of the thing is a lot stronger, I feel. Excuse me. It manages to catch a rocket and fling it on New Game Plus, which is entirely cool action. it gets a unique trait over its forebear.
That's true.
So yeah, while it's not winning many higher marks, it's at least got if that's an A, OG Tyrant's an A, that's like being A+1. So yeah, that sound design, it's got a more uniqueness to its design, despite it being basically the blueprint from now on, in that it's thin. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
it's well made, everybody.
No, I agree with you. I think that's fair. I would probably put it in the same place, but I'm not going to disregard the fact that you're right. The original version of this creature does look more monstrous and slightly less human than this one does. The frame on it, you're right, it's something about it, but made up for by the music, the sound design, etc. For me, at least. All right, getting into...
We can go with that. I can happily bow to the peer pressure of the parents.
Welcome to the show. This is how it goes. Let's get to the next big boy. Perhaps at this point, the poster child, at least in the set, the T-103. Specifically, we're going to talk about the original Resident Evil 2 version. This is hugely important to the Tyrant line because this is the one where pretty much everything else sort of spins off from. This is the perfected version where a lot of the other Tyrants we're going to talk about kind of develop from this. Steve, how do you feel about classic Mr. X?
Much like classic Coke, it's fantastic. You know, I have actually no complaints of OG Mr. X. If anything, its lack of emotion and character and no frustration and just does the job is terrifying. Like, you know, it literally exudes that Terminator exterior. It's just coming for you. You know, there's nothing you can do. You can't negotiate with it. You can shoot it, slow it down. It's coming for you. I think the one time maybe it loses its cool is when it gets like shot in the eyes by Ada in Leon B, and then it just like flings her and falls over. It's not really much dramatic. Otherwise, it's a stoic killing machine, and I really like that about this. So there's no like glow-in-the-dark tentacles or anything big and scary about it. It's just, I'm a big dude in a coat and you can't kill me.
Right. Yeah, no, do you know, it's a really good point you say about Terminator and stuff. That's the obvious touch point. And it's really cool that in a game like Resident Evil, specifically Resident Evil 2, which is so many movie references and homages, for this to just basically be, what if Terminator was a monster? And it's unique enough. It's identifiable. This is just the Terminator, really. But it's got enough going on that you're like, nope, this is definitely its own thing. Yeah, absolutely. And its transformation, we obviously need to reference Super Tyrant and that kind of thing. It's just the right amount of sort of change for me without getting, as you say, maybe a little bit too silly, as it were. It just becomes, I'm super buff now at this point. Sherwin, how do you feel about classic T-103?
Yeah, I like what Capcom did with the Tyrant. You know, you kind of have, let's go back to original Resident Evil 2. Yeah, we have the first Tyrant, T-002. You get to that as your boss. It's the thing that you're going towards. There's some rumor of, you have no idea this thing even exists to a point. You get to the labs, you find out rumors of this thing. Okay, there's like a scratched out file you can find. There's something there. You're obviously building towards, this big bad that you don't quite know what it is. And then it's revealed to you in all of its horrific glory and it's coming for you. This, by comparison, doesn't try to repeat that. It literally says, you're right, there's a Tyrant. It's coming for you. It's just there. It's the Terminator effect that you guys have both touched on. I think, for me, from a gameplay perspective, this Tyrant, in terms of you look at its cutscenes, its presence, like what it does, cool, fantastic. If you're looking at its gameplay side of things, for its sort of, for its normal original version where you first meet it, technically not. It's not hard to avoid. Yeah. Most of the time, you're just going to run past it. It's not a terribly imposing foe. It's not. I think it's smaller than the original T-002 as well. If you remember back to when you first see that, when it comes out of the tank, that thing's huge. Whereas this is a smaller Tyrant in terms of the actual game itself, in terms of how it appears. For me, that it's a nice idea. It just doesn't necessarily work quite as imposingly. When obviously it gets to being a Super Tyrant side, it's got a lot more bulk, massive across the shoulders. It's quite an imposing thing. It doesn't cause terror in me the same way as what the T-002 did, either version of them.
I mean, mechanically, not to jump in, mechanically in the original RE2, it doesn't even show up until the second scenario in the first place. And even then, it's only like, it can hit you a few times with punches, but if you're really persistent, you can walk past it and bugger off. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you just run straight past it. Like if you think about most of the times you've encountered it, the first time you're like, oh, that's not good, and then you run straight past it. There's a point of Tyrant lore which I cannot stand, and this is introduced with this model, which is the idea of this power limiter trench coat thing, which is just horrifically bad.
It's so anime, isn't it?
Yeah, it's terrible. I'm going to have to suspend that for the entirety of the rest of this list, because otherwise I won't get any further than F for all of these things. But, I think I like this Tyrant. It's solid. I like the way that Capcom used it to introduce new concepts to what the Tyrant can do, and yet still have that sort of big bad weighing at the end, which is cool. I like the mutation when it goes in. It kind of, it forcibly reacts to kind of, near-death experience or whatever else. Yeah, it's cool. Is it as cool as the other two that we've had? Well, the other three we've seen so far? No. Does that still make it an A? Probably, considering how it comes in, but I would drop this to a B.
Interesting. This is an S for me, for what it's worth. You're right, though. Like when you're actually playing the game, it's incredibly avoidable. Although the actual final showdown with it is awesome. The actual rest of the campaign, much less so after that initial impact. But yeah, the fact that it's introduced in a second playthrough is really cool. Like, you played the whole game through. If you were just like, that's it, I'm done, and didn't put the second disc in, you don't get to even experience this thing at all. So it's kind of like, yeah, it was a way to flesh out the game and mix things up for your B scenario and stuff like that. So I love that part of it. Yeah, it's a tough one, because I say this is right at the top for me. Yeah, Steve, where would you put this to see if we can find a happy middle ground?
Oh, okay, a happy middle ground.
Apparently everything's going in A, so...
Yeah, no, I unfortunately have the not benefit of nostalgia, so I totally actually agree. I think it's the best Tyrant I've made. But mechanically, I think it's a bit rubbish. Like, it has a few cool entrances when it falls on the sky in the helicopter, when it punches through the press office room twice, and then when it corners you on the way, if you're playing as Claire, to the clock tower, not the clock, well, what would be the clock tower in the remake, but isn't
right, yeah,
in this. And generally speaking, I'm also on Team Powell to quote stupid. I've always thought it's stupid. I'll die on the hill with Sherwin, spear in hand. I think the little chip in the head on Remake 2 Tyrant is a much better idea as a power limiter, but that's by the by. So yeah, it does have some flaws, but as the now realized, actualized version of a tyrant, as what the concept was, as in a soldier killing thing, it's pretty good. I think its final showdown is like, literally, let's take the original Tyrant's final fight and put an extra claw on it, which is awesome. You know, so all its little flaws kind of make me want to say top of A, but I also kind of want to put it in S. So yeah, because I think.
Let me land with this. Bearing in mind there are potentially at least two things coming up that are going to go into S. Do we want to shoot that load too soon, or would we rather kind of drop it into A for the moment, knowing it could step up?
Okay, let's put it on top of A, and then I'm interested in what that means exactly. Let's get to an extremely popular recent addition, the T-103, and now you insert the Simpsons bit with Swell and Smithers, but now he's got a new hat, which in itself, that's a D right there. Stupid. I hate it. The thing I hate about the Tyrant T-103 in general, but especially in Remake 2, is the idea that it's meant to slip by undetected. You know, like 7'1.5" tall man with a grey face. But he's got a hat, so we won't know. It's just a dude. I just find that stupid. But there you go. But, of course, from a gameplay perspective, this is the guy that sold Remake 2, essentially, especially to a casual audience. This is the thing that blew up. And also kind of overshadowed another Tyrant by being so good, which we're about to talk about later. Steve, how do you feel about Remake 2?
See, I have no problems with the hat. I think it's goofy, it's fun. It references a bit of Outbreak box art, Outbreak concept art, which, for a character who we're going to do in a bit, I think that's neat. Mechanically, I wish you could down the thing for longer. I feel like its presence in both scenarios so heavily is a detriment.
Agreed.
The fact that it's a persistent stalker through the RPD, it's fantastic. The sound design alone is terrifying. Hearing his footfalls on the other side of the building and thinking you're safe, and then no, it's just down the hall. Like, it's probably the best stalker the series has ever done in a realized location as well, which is to the detriment of some of the other competitors on this list. You know, and probably stole the crown a bit too.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's pretty good. Like, I even like, as much as I would give the original Tyrant 103 a tip to the hat for being Terminator-like and soulless, this one even has like that little bit more aggravation. Like, you shoot that silly little hat off, and he goes, and it's proper mad about it, and goes, right, I'm going to kick your ass. You know, I love that. It's perhaps becoming overused now, thanks to the likes of minigames, side games. But the fact that T-103 himself is being acknowledged as a bit more of a character compared to how it was in yesteryear, I think is great. As a
yeah. I agree.
So, yeah, I would actually say, hand on heart, S.
I'm with you. Like, there's so much about this that I could pick apart. As I say, the hat, I agree with you. The fact that it's across both scenarios, that's more of an issue with Remake 2 in general, isn't it? The lack of a B playthrough. And also, I think its Super Tyrant form is kind of pants, to be quite honest. Not nearly as good as the original, but that's just my personal preference. Shirley, where do you land on Mr. X from Remake 2?
I am glad you landed on that. The Super Tyrant for this model is awful.
Yeah, it's really
absolutely awful. It looks bad.
In the RE-verse splash image that they used for everything, there's a Super Tyrant to one side, and it does not remotely... It looks like Chaos from Resident Evil 6. Right. It doesn't look like Super Tyrant at all to me, and so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that we've said. Sorry, go on. Jump in.
I was going to say, the aesthetic of Super Tyrant 2, Remake 2, I like it in that it's probably the first time I've seen a Tyrant who's battle damaged beyond repair besides Nemesis. I like the fact that what I'm calling the power limiter chip, until proven otherwise, is blown out. So it's like he's just lost it. He's berserk. And the aesthetic of a broken off jaw, I kind of like as something different. I don't think it's as cool, like as the PS1 model for RE2 RE2 Tyrant. But I do appreciate the fact that it's as its own unique thing as a battle damaged berserk Tyrant. It's kind of neat. I would have preferred the buff foot thing with two claws, but I'll take it. Is what I'm saying.
I think, for all the reasons you guys said, especially so much, it feels like it's a character.
Yeah,
this really steps up. I think again, and talking about what Capcom did with the original T0. I want to call it a T-002, which technically it is, I guess, but considering
that's
what
his name. His brand is T103. His name is T102.
But we're talking about the T-002, aren't we? We aren't talking about that lad, to be specific. But regardless, thinking about that Tyrant, like how the original mixed it up, this one really mixes it up again. Like, throwing this in as it is, it's just amazing. Chef's kiss. Like, it's perfect. I mean, this may well be debunked. You guys will probably know, because Steve, you probably know the exact code. But I believe I remember seeing a video like after around about the time that the RE2 remake came out, where someone had actually gone into the code of the game. This Tyrant actually walks around looking for you. It doesn't spawn in nearby when you start running or start shooting or anything. I think it actually walks around the police station.
Generally speaking, yes, there are like certain events where he will like walk.
Yeah,
but generally speaking, he is a persistent thing.
Yeah, it's walking around somewhere. That alone is terrifying.
Yes,
the idea of this is entities walking around the police station looking for you, completely individually, the same way as what you are. That's amazing, and the fact that you can hear it opening doors. You watch it punch out zombies if they're in the way. That sort of stuff. Love this thing. This to me is S.
Yeah,
despite a not the best Super Tyrant form, this is S tier for me.
Indeed. Well done, T103, despite your flaws.
And I'm with you. The hat is not a flaw. The hat is absolutely it's a selling point. Don't like it, shoot it off.
I do. Don't you worry, I do. Okay, so let's talk about Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. The Tyrant's so good. In fact, it's the only Tyrant so good that its name's on the game, outside of Japan anyway. Of course, we're talking about Nemesis, the classic version of Nemesis first. Speaking of tentacles, Showen, how do you feel about classic Leather Daddy?
This is the definitive best Tyrant with zero exceptions. Absolutely terrifying creature. Has the best intro of any Tyrant in the entire series. Just turns up. And literally, arguably you've got the intro, which kind of spoils it a fraction, but just literally turns up, rips Brad Vickers to pieces, just perfect.
I'm with you. I wouldn't have actually... it's such a minor thing. I really would have liked if it would just be called Resident Evil 3 Last Escape Everywhere. Take Nemesis off the box. I want the first time you see him to be that cutscene because it's so good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
What is this horrible abomination?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the last games, you played the whole game through, the Tyrant's right at the end. You played Resident Evil 2, you completed the game, the Tyrant's on your second playthrough. Nemesis, straight out the gate, right at you. So it would have blown players' minds, but...
Yeah, and I mean, do you know the same way that, when they made Tomb Raider and they wanted to turn Lara Croft into a massive character, so that's why it's Tomb Raider featuring Lara Croft, which they were so desperate to turn Lara Croft into what it was, but they didn't want to call the name Lara Croft. Nemesis is Capcom's Lara Croft. Let that sink in for a moment. It is literally Resident Evil Nemesis. Like that's pretty much it. Like featuring Nemesis. Put him on the front cover, like, turns up. Pretty much what it is.
Yeah, I love so much. I've got a few issues with Nemesis in the same way we just talked about the last one. There's a bunch of stuff that's like, most prominently, everyone always talks about how you never quite know where he's going to show up. But maybe it's just the way that I play the game and I always go the same route, but I pretty much know where he's going to be. But that just comes with the territory, I suppose. But all bits like that aside, yeah, absolute S rank, legendary design, the sound design as well, music design, and an evolution of T-103 being the tyrant with the mission. This is that guy, just times 100, to the point where it doesn't matter if his body's melting. He's still like, yes, must fulfill objective. Scary stuff. Steve, Nemesis, S rank?
Yeah, pretty much. My only foibles with it would be it kicked my ass so hard when I was a kid. It can do everything a player can. Like, it can go through doors, it can equip weapons. It can dodge. Even Jill can dodge, but so can Nemesis.
I don't think it opens doors as much as smashes them to pieces, but either way, yeah.
You say everything the player does. In my head now, I've got Nemesis hunched over a typewriter, so thanks for that. Maybe not everything.
Yeah, Nemesis solves puzzles, just happens to use brute force like a rocket launcher and his fists. Yeah. The only caveat I would probably throw against Nemesis, and this is more of a personal taste thing, is the feel like there's not enough stalking scenes so much as just he's there kicking the living daylights out of you. When he appears, he's like, hello, Jill. I'm going to punch out this hydrant and then we're going at it. Come on, let's go. There's not so much a moment of terror. It's just, I'm here to kick the shit out. Sorry. That's probably my only complaint. As a tyrant himself, when he's there, he's a presence that even affects the soundtrack. That's how scary he is. You can tell when he's a room away. That's pretty cool. Fighting him, you can dodge his attacks, you can dodge yours, specifically grenades and stuff that's not hit scan. But it's more interesting than its forebears, and arguably the one successor that's currently on the board. So, yeah.
And I think from a gameplay perspective, possibly offers the most different types of encounter of all of the tyrants.
Definitely.
Purely because of the various different melty cheese versions of them. You've got a different gameplay. Yeah. I think for me, this is literally the definitive S rank.
Okay. Well, the question is,
if it's not the T-001, which really is the answer, but that's not good on there.
So, are we putting this rather tippity top? Because I wouldn't be mad about it being the tippity top.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay. Well, let's speak about its counterpart. Controversial for numerous reasons, for its appearances in the game being perhaps somewhat lacking, and the bin bag aesthetic that it's got going on.
Glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I will have to say, though, whilst I wasn't one of these people that was totally thrown off, I mean, maybe a little bit when I first saw it, it has certainly grown on me over the last few years. I actually kind of like Remake Nemi. It's just really a shame that he didn't get to do more than what he does get to do. Sherwin, how do you feel about Remake 3's Nemesis?
Yeah, I agree. The big problem that this Nemesis has is that static images don't do it any favours.
Probably true.
When you encounter it in the game, it's much more terrifying. It feels much more realised and much more sensible. Much like the T-103 with its hat. It makes more sense when you actually see it in motion when you encounter it in the game versus just seeing a static image of it standing there surrounded by bin bags. That said, it just doesn't have the same level of character as what the original Nemesis does. It doesn't feel like it dominates the game in the same way as what the original Nemesis does. It is easy to just kind of run past and then forget all about because the way it appears, it is predictable.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it just doesn't, considering how well Capcom put in T-103 Remake, or in the remake, this just feels very poorly realised as a result, unfortunately.
Yes.
And I'm not a massive fan of its kind of evolutions, devolutions, whatever way you want to approach it. I think especially the final form just doesn't feel Resident Evil to my mind. It just doesn't really feel like it fits in too much. It's kind of taking a whole bunch from the Birkin stable of things, and I think that just feels like a fairly Yeah, the original Nemesis was something where it was an uncontrollable monster that kind of just spawns out, and it feels unstable.
Yes.
This, by comparison, just feels very much more structured.
It
like,
feels.
This is.
It feels like a video game boss. Like,
yeah, that's the
it's
best
just
way
like
of describing it.
Here is a first form. Here is a second form. I'm a dog now for some reason. Now fight me again in the same form. And you're right. You know, I enjoyed that final boss fight, despite the fact that it kicked my head in for several hours on like the harder difficulties. I actually enjoy the fight, but you're right. It's too wanted to be Birkin and not being its own thing. And this might
very fun. It feels very Final Fantasy boss level.
Yeah, a little bit. That. Yeah. This might not necessarily be something that everybody can necessarily relate to, but I find when news articles or whatever are posting about Resident Evil and they want to use an image of Nemesis, and probably if you Google image search, you're going to find like fan adaptations of Remake Nemesis as much as you are the actual thing. I always see people and pages posting like mods to make Nemesis look more like classic Nemesis, and they just use that without even thinking about it because they don't realise that that's not the Remake Nemesis, which is it's just a shame for Remake Nemesis that he gets overlooked like that. But I also understand it because he really had no lasting impact, sadly. Right.
Well, I'm going to be that one. That guy. Right, okay. I really dig the design. Bin bags aside, the actual aesthetic of a tyrant's face being broken to bits from the parasite side looks amazing. The one playground he gets to play in with his full moveset, the area,
downtown, I think. Or is it one of the two?
Yeah, that is amazing. Like, if we had a full city of Jill trying to get away from that, best Resident Evil game ever made. With the anyway. Like, unfortunately, he's tethered to just uptown or downtown, and it's just cinematic battles.
Yeah.
Like, Bloodborne or Bloodstarved Nemesis is cool on its own vacuum. Alien Queen Nemesis is alright, but it pales in comparison to his forebear. Like, you know, they're neat. But base form, like when he's still got two legs and he's got weapons and stuff, I think he's a fantastic creature who should have been implemented better. And that's not his fault, that's the game's. So I would actually, honestly, probably put him at the bottom of S. Like, and that probably sounds like I'm overselling him a bit. But in terms of his mechanics and his actual presence as a character throughout Remake 3, he's pretty in there. Like, you know, he's there as an actual threat. You feel like he could kill you, even though he technically doesn't kill anyone in that game. Now I think about it. But he's got so many tricks. He's got all those little tentacle attacks. He can now make monsters. Like, you know, he can dynamically use a flamethrower and a rocket launcher. That pursuit with the rocket launcher, by the way, absolutely brilliant set piece. Not biased at all, everybody. Okay, but I love me a good rocket launcher chase. It's just hampered by the fact that it's got the same boss fight twice in the clock tower and the lab, and then it's got a giant lumbering thing we have to dodge for 40 minutes before you can get a laser bolt off if you're playing on the hard difficulty. If he was in his own game, if this was like Resident Evil 9 and we've got Jill fighting a Nemesis again, people will lap it up. It'd be fantastic. Because it's Remake 3 and unfortunately he's compared to his forebear, he just doesn't hold a candle in that regard.
I can see where you're coming from.
I'll counter that. I really like Remake 3. I think Remake 3 is a good game.
I mean, I do,
but people are too harsh to it. And I think those people forget. We look back at RE3, the original, with so much more rose-tinted glasses. Like, I've played that game to death. I do love it, but it is quirky. It's not it's not the best Resident Evil experience by a long way. And I think people unfairly sort of put that on a pedestal when they're comparing it to 3 Remake or Remake 3. But yeah, I think this is the element of that game that suffers the most. For me, this is an A, and it's bottom of A.
Wow,
because it's just not scary. It's just not it's just a thing that just feels scripted.
Well,
it's the first of all the Tyrants we're looking at right now. It's the first one that feels like it's part of a video game, not like a story behind it that makes you go, "Wow, that's awesome."
I thought I was probably going to be alone in my optimism for it. That being said, I was thinking C, to be honest.
Well, I'll happily drop it into a B, and then we'll meet halfway.
I can roll with a B. Sorry, Steve.
Proto-Tyrant took a hit from me, so
it's fine.
It's definitely not as good as Proto-Tyrant.
No, it's not. No.
There you go.
Sorry,
Nemi. Okay, so sticking with Raccoon City and its ever-expanding cast of bald-headed bastards, we've got a couple of tyrants to talk about. Also, we might as well do an honourable mention now. We were going to do Tyrant C, which is the red-coated tyrant with devil horns for some reason, but it appears in the battle games. It doesn't really feel fair to include it. And also, by the same token, shout out to Gold Tyrant. I don't know if you,
what's their law, Si? Do you know?
They fell in a vat of gold paint, I expect. It's pretty much how that works.
You're just sat there looking at the peroxide blonde hair going, you know what?
Yeah, I like that. Let's go with that. He modelled it in his image.
Sega were looking to create a more edgy tyrant, and that's what they manufactured.
Yeah, it's the tyrant that got all the Chaos Emeralds.
Yes!
Exactly what it is.
Oh, dear.
So let's talk about the tyrants that are part of the main campaign. Starting with Thanatos, the Greg Mueller created abomination, the somewhat, in a sense, this is like every tyrant that comes around is like, no, this is the perfect version. This is also the perfect version because it's near indestructible, to be quite honest. Even when you fire a rocket at it, that doesn't necessarily take it out. It's pretty much just the bombing of the city that's going to do it. You can take it out in the final battle, and even then, there's a bad ending with Kevin and somebody where it comes back to life again just before the bomb drops. So, yeah, this is a pretty indestructible monster. Steve, how do you feel about Thanatos?
I kind of wish that this is one of the reasons why I wish Outbreak was still more relevant in the current era, because the concept behind an umbrella scientist who is upset with the mainstream machine and is like, I'm going to make my own tyrant. It's going to be unique, it's going to be special, it's going to be the best one ever made. And, okay, it suffers from Outbreak's weird wobbly arm tyrant syndrome where they're all elasticated.
Yeah.
But the idea of making a perfect, unkillable machine, and it actually does feel like it, and it's got like the goofiest run, it's really charming. Like, as the crux of the entire scenario, you've got to like knock it out at one point and then steal its blood just to make a vaccine, which you then could just screw up and weaponize against it for great effect. But yeah, the fact that nothing really kills it, except for a nuclear bomb, is pretty cool. It doesn't have a character, though. It literally will stalk you from room to room, yes, but it doesn't do much except wobble up to you and swing at you.
Yeah.
Which doesn't quite have presence.
Yeah. My issue with this tyrant is less about the tyrant itself and more just sort of, at this point, and we got this with Raccoon City in general, with so many stories playing out, how many tyrants are running around that city? Like, we have Mr. X and all of his buddies that are part of this thing that gets dropped in various parts of the city. We have Nemesis, we have Thanatos, we have Tyrant R. I think there's several of them. It's just like, you're kind of drawing the line at this point and being like, are we going to jump over that? Because it feels a little bit ludicrous to me in terms of that. But, you know, it's not really its fault, unfortunately. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, in Outbreak itself, specifically File 1, I think it's the only tyrant in it. Like,
yeah, I think so.
If memory serves, it's File 2 where they start putting tyrants bloody everywhere.
Yeah, well, yes, especially, yeah.
Yeah.
Sherwin, how do you feel about Thanatos?
I think this is possibly... No, I think it is. I think this is the most anonymous tyrant on this list.
Possibly, yeah.
And it just, Steve hit on the nail on the head. It's just got no character. It's tyrant because for the sake of putting a tyrant in the game, it doesn't really do anything new or different that you didn't already see from a tyrant. It's not, it's not the creepy, scary thing that you find unexpectedly and go, where the hell did that come from? But I know what it is immediately from the lore. That's terrifying. It's, and it shows how you get there, like the proto-tyrant. It's not the first time you encounter one, and it's a terrifying base level, which is just scary. It's not pursuing you. It's not then pursuing you plus in New Game Plus. It's in a whole different way.
Yeah, I got to the final sscenario, so there must be a tyrant.
Right, and it just, and the fact that, it can take all sorts of damage, it's like, well, so can all the other tyrants effectively. Like, if its only big selling point to me is that it doesn't look quite the same as the other tyrants, it's, and it basically has that level of, it's not going to get blown up by a rocket in the same way as everybody else. It's not really that great. I think for me, this is a C. It's not a bad tyrant as such, it's just nothing special.
Yeah, I could go for a C.
Just a generic. It's about as generic as a zombie in the grand.
Yeah,
scheme.
it's
I agree.
Standard issue tyrant.
tedious thing is, like, Thanatos would be more interesting if it was just the fact that it's the lore of his creator that's more compelling, but man who would go out his way to make his own tyrant rather than the actual tyrant itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also if you're doing that, it would have been really interesting to push the design boundaries some more. Like, oh, well, the greatest tyrant doesn't look the same as the other tyrants. It has, like an extra arm grafted to its back, or like, we've done something funky to it to make it look really different.
It's wearing Speedos.
I was going to say, this tyrant has shame, and that's the difference. It's wearing clothes.
Yeah, like it just doesn't. It feels like, well, I wanted to make the ultimate tyrant. What's different about it? It's my tyrant. Okay.
Yeah. C. I could even go as far as D. To be honest, it is very rudimentary and just kind of suits a purpose rather than actually adding anything to the tyrant lore. Unfortunately, for me, I agree, Steve. The character who creates it is far more interesting than the tyrant itself.
Yeah.
I wanted to save the D for like the stuff that we're going to come along. And go, yeah, that's really not great. It's just generic.
He has the cutest waddly run. If you ever play Outbreak, like he the others like sprint angelically somewhat, like almost like Olympian. Yeah. He's more like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, but
in that regard,
is that scary?
No,
no, and that's the point. It's supposed to scare the crap out of you. It's a tyrant.
I like the only tiny bit of lore that I can remotely eschew from this at a stretch is that further into the game when it mutates, and it gets one giant arm and one scraggly rubbish arm, and I'm like, oh, that's the same thing that happened when they made the Bandersnatch. That's cool. That is a prevailing error of the Tyrant program. You're linking those two games together. As I say, that is a stretch for a compliment.
Oh.
I would actually say that's pretty on the money, though, because it is elasticated to...
Exactly, that's always what it makes me think of. Yeah.
Mm.
So I can do C. Steve, you happy with C?
Yeah, I think it's our first crap. It's our first C. Yeah.
Let's stick with Outbreak and talk about Tyrant R. Be interested to see where this one lands. It is really just again, it suffers with the same thing in that it's just another tyrant. I like its super tyrant design is really cool. The way that the sort of upper body looks is especially cool. And also it has two claws, so that's kind of neat, I guess. Sherwin, how do you feel about Tyrant R?
I mean, yeah, the thing to talk about here is the Super Tyrant form, which is cool. It's arguably one of the coolest Super Tyrant designs.
I love the artwork as well, because it's like screaming in it.
Yeah, it just it looks like it's also smoking. Like it's literally she stole its vape and it's just angry about that. But, I like the Super Tyrant form of this. I mean, it begs the question, taking that away for a second, what I understand from a lore perspective what is different about Tyrant C compared to T-103, but if they're going to look more or less identical, what's the point? Again, make it more of a feature. Make it feel different. Don't just go, well, this is the same as a T-103, but it's got a better control method. I get logically why that would be the case, but again, this is not something rooted in... it's not rooted in real life. It's something where you want it to be, you want it to have a presence, a feel, something different. Give it a big bulbous skull or something, or where you put something in it. Give it something to make it feel different in some shape or form. This one, it isn't Thanatos bad. Is the Super Tyrant design enough to kind of elevate it? Its gameplay is not great. It's probably a C.
I would agree. Steve, how do you feel about Tyrant R?
Tyrant R or Tyrant another one. Like this one feels so like off the rails generic at this point. And this is a Steve complaint. But that super form we're all praising is repurposed as Tyrant Form 2 in like Darkside Chronicles and stuff. Pretty sure.
It is.
So he even gets to gift his best trait to a forebear. Like he's just a green. He's just I'm going to say tracksuit. It's a very different kind of tyrant. That's a very different kind of tyrant. Like a green trench-coated tyrant that has a bomb in its head that you can detonate. Ooh, okay.
If I was looking
at that point, is it technically a T-103 just with a different chip in its head at that point?
I think so.
Possibly,
There's going to be minutiae of the lore. Yeah. Its presence in the scenario versus an ally that then turns against you is okay.
Yeah, sure. I was going to say that's my compliment for it in there is that sort of like this idea of we're creating weapons for all different armies to use against each other. And you get to see a little bit of that here with Tyrant R that is specifically designed to take out Hunter R. That's kind of neat. and the whole ally sort of when you try to reprogram it and it ends up going horribly wrong thing is cool. But beyond that,
It literally, like, the second that remote gets broken and he goes, right, I'm just a tyrant now, punch. It goes from being interesting to just like a knockoff of the RE2 Tyrant.
Yep.
For me. Like, the initial setup's great, though. So I'll put him, like, at least above Thanatos.
Yeah, I would agree.
Still probably C.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. Cool.
We'll agree there.
And the super form, we all agree, is neat. Someone else burgles it down the line and makes better use of it.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, let's jump to another spin-off title with Resident Evil Survivor and Hypnos T, which is I don't really understand the naming convention there, like why it was called that. I guess maybe that's another,
It's Greek god.
I was going to say it's probably a Greek god reference that I haven't picked up on necessarily. But, I always kind of liked Hypnos T and all of his various designs. He got mentioned earlier as being perhaps the sort of most agile, the sleekest tyrant of the lot, perhaps, who then, by the end of his transformations, becomes a little goofy looking, but I don't hate it, to be honest. Steve, how do you feel about Mr. Hypnos?
In terms of the fact that it's like they're meant to be like Sheena Island's like Ace in the Hole, the best tyrant Vincent's working on, and the fact that it looks like an adolescent, considering what he's done to adolescents throughout, is actually really nice.
Yeah.
Like, there's a thematic through line, and then going from a youth with a blade arm and almost like a sleeve made of like call it. Slowly becoming more and more bestial and monstrous is just interesting. Like, we don't normally see that kind of progression in the Tyrants. Normally, I am a giant bulking thing, and now I'm a giant bulking thing with claws out. Nemesis aside, but that's more Nemesis goes from being a tyrant to Lovecraft. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Seeing a tyrant evolve, and it's rapid as well. It's like, 2 or 3 encounters, it keeps just becoming something else. Yeah, I think it's neat. I genuinely do. I wish I knew what the Greek god of Hypnos was about, because clearly Nemesis, so I'm guessing that's why it was chosen, isn't it?
Yeah, same with Thanatos as well.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, lore-wise, horrifying. Mechanically, it's a bit crap, but that's Resident Evil Survivor.
I was going to say.
It's not its fault. It's okay mechanically, just nothing special.
I agree. There's that boss fight doesn't have any bells and whistles that we haven't seen from other tyrants, really, does it? Which is a shame. Other than it, even the fact, it sprints around. Yeah, we've had that since day dot. So yeah,
I mean, the more bulky it gets, the more interesting it becomes.
No, totally.
So it's just tyrant, but with youth.
Sharon, how do you feel about Hypnos?
I like boy band tyrant. Again, as champion of the obscure rubbish games, I think. Yeah, I like this tyrant. I think it's not up there with the A tier, as it were, with the A's in the class, but it is certainly fun. And I like what you said, Steve. I love the lore of it. Like, the idea is this is what happens if you polish and polish and polish and polish the tyrant to get it to its ultimate form, and it kind of ends up being almost more human. As you do that, it almost feels like it's more, it's kind of getting back, it's almost eradicating all of the really rough edges, all of the weird, strange mutations and so on. It's getting rid of all the horrific parts of what a tyrant looks like, and you end up with something that's actually feels more like some sort of scary elite super soldier that you've created, this creature that feels something else, and almost starts to feel quite alien, quite different, quite like it's almost another species entirely. And I really like that. There's a part to his design, and then the idea of, again, as you're defeating this thing, as you're smashing bits into it, basically as you're trying to kill it, it just degenerates into this monster. Like, it starts off and it feels more civilized. It feels kind of this strange design. It feels very otherworldly, and then all you're doing is dragging it down to this horrific base from which it was made. You're turning it into this primordial creature, which is just reacting to you smashing away all the civilization. There's a really interesting dialogue, I think, with the game of how it works. You have to forget the gameplay because it's, as you guys have said, it's Survivor. But yeah, for me, I like the way that this is presented, and I think it's not necessarily got the same level of character as Nemesis, for example. It's not game defining, but it does feel, for the amount of time it's there, it definitely makes its presence felt. It justifies its own inclusion by what it is, and I think that's strong, and I think that's important.
Okay, so where does it go on the board? I mean, you absolutely sold it to me there. I mean, I was already a fan, but I'm in favour of Hypnos Tyrant. I don't know, top of B, bottom of maybe. I don't know if I go as far as A, but I think it's better than Remake.
I think it's top of B.
If counterpoint, if Remake Nemesis was off his leash, he's beating it, but he's not. So Hypnos batters it. Me anyway. Like, also, quick Google: Hypnos is the god of sleep. I don't see how that's relevant.
Yeah, that's what I assumed, but I don't really get why. But okay,
it's worse.
Sleep is like death.
I kind of wish we had his other image there, because the other image, the beast form, like, it looks like he's singing hair metal the entire time. But yeah, that's neat. I'll accept that.
I agree. I think this is a Tyrant which feels like it has presence. It feels like it has its own individuality. I think that means it's in the right place. It's not up there with the other Tyrants. It's not as good as the A-class stuff, but it's good.
Okay, so from November 1998 to December 1998, Rockfall Island and the T-078, the Tyrant he was like a test Tyrant designed for training the USS, I think, that did their training on that island. Ergo, he doesn't have the claws, he's got two big thuddy arms instead, which is cool, I guess. Steve, how do you feel about T-078, catchy name?
Captain Hamhands.
Captain Hamhands.
He's okay. I don't think, literally, when you compare him to his PS1 forebears, he is definitely the least imposing. Like, if he didn't have the benefit of corner trapping you against fire or the back of a thing, he's been bagged here. Like, I'm pretty sure even Thanatos would have him. But I look at the list and just go, yeah, they'll batter him. If they put him in a fight in a cage, he's the rubbish one. He's the run of the litter, and that's fine. Lore-wise, being the crap tyrant is his job, so that's fine. But it's not the most enjoyable to engage with, in my opinion. Especially in Dark Side Chronicles, that is a complete arseache. He's all right at CV because he's got two tricks. You could just use two gas rounds and slam the crane, and he's gone.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. So that's fine. The fact that this trick's just removing him from play, but he looks. How do I put this? He looks like the T-002 with all the character shaved off.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. I get that. The artwork for him as well, he looks miserable about it as well, to be honest. I know they're not meant to be happy-looking creatures, but I'm looking at it as you say that, and he doesn't look happy with his existence. Sherwin, how do you feel about the T-078?
No, I'm going to give you a counterpoint to that. There's a charm about this Tyrant, for me. Thinking on it, and from a gameplay perspective, just for a moment, you have to deal with this Tyrant. It's not like the original T-103 where you just run past it. You have to deal with this Tyrant. That immediately puts it on a certain level, it presents something to you, and there is unique gameplay about how you do deal with it. But for me, what I like so much about this creature is that it feels commonplace, and that's not like what you had with Tyrant R or Thanatos, where it's this is the mandatory Tyrant that has to go in, this is the big bad, but actually it feels a bit run-of-the-mill and a bit like nothing new going on here. This is a Tyrant where it just feels like this is a standard issue Tyrant. These guys aren't a big scary thing anymore, they just have them now.
Yeah.
This is one they just train with it.
Yeah.
It's almost like the zombies, or it's like a hunter or whatever else. This is now, we are rolling out Tyrants, and they just are around. They're just here, and that's a whole new level of scary. Understanding this level of Tyrants are now just appear. There are just Tyrants as well. They've added that to the arsenal of things that are arrayed against me, and there's something about that which feels quite intimidating in its own way. It's a scary boss become a commonplace foe, and that in itself, when it is a Tyrant, is a scary thing. So I don't know. It doesn't turn it into incredible god tier stuff, obviously, but I think I'm more sympathetic towards it than what you perhaps were, Steve. I think there's something to this guy which feels I'm a touch more charitable. I'm not sure it makes it into B, though.
Yeah, I don't think so. It lands really in the same spot for me as the Outbreak one. It's just kind of, for me anyway, it's a determination of that order. Steve, where would you put 7-8?
Me personally, I put him at the bottom of C. but I can see why some people would probably rate him higher, like Sherwin has said. So charitably, I'd argue top of C.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's fair.
He's not disappointing the same way as the other two are. Like the other two,
He's just doing his job.
Yeah, he's providing a function.
Well, he feels more like he's a conscious decision to be in there and to give you something which isn't a tyrant because you always have a tyrant at the end of the game.
Speaking of, this one's an interesting one. We're going to leave 1998 for the first time to talk about Dead Aim, the T-109, created with the T and G virus, something that I always thought was pretty silly. Let's take the two viruses in the series and just slam them together, just because. And honestly, this, I think we got our first D here. This is, I talked about Hypnos having kind of a goofy face when he becomes a monster. This guy looks like he'd strolled off some sort of disturbing version of Sesame Street. He's just got like this like grin about him. It's bizarre. Sherwin, how do you feel about T-109?
This is what would happen if you put a tyrant in Silent Hill, except it would be more terrifying because of the way that things appear in Silent Hill. Until you got to the point where you realise that actually this is a tyrant being controlled by the dog in the hotel in Silent Hill. I have nothing good to say about this tyrant. The only thing I'll say on this before we move on, Steve, is that I wish we had lower than D. To give this tyrant its due.
Well,
what do you reckon?
If there was some supplemental law to make it so this wasn't like meant to be a new high quality product, because the whole point of Spencer Rain is meant to have really high. No, Spencer Rain. Yeah. It's meant to have high quality weapons on it, and to be fair, they're all a bit crap. Hunter Elites can map me internet. I think that was actually in the last one we did. It's kind of rubbish. Like if it was a proto tyrant, like a new version of the T virus concept that was a proto tyrant variant, more charitable, because it's meant to be like an apex badass weapon, and all it is just spaghetti arms tyrant with a smashed up face. Crap.
Yeah, it is.
It's got one cool little bit of stage presence when it does its move and then it untangles its hands. It looks kind of neat when it does that. Otherwise, it's garbage.
I never understood why it has tentacles, because that's a parasite Nemesis thing, not a G virus thing. So I don't really understand why putting a G virus in it suddenly gives it tentacles or whatever. But there you go. That's just me.
I got nothing. Same as the designers of the bioweapon. It's like, yeah, look at this, Jeff. Isn't it that neat?
Print it.
Like tentacle arms and everything. That's clearly the apex.
All right,
of D tier.
Yeah, the apex of D tier. Pretty unanimous opinion. We're going to jump forward many years now. Talk about Umbrella Chronicles and its two tyrants, or three, I guess. But let's start with the T-011, also known as Telos, which stands for Tyrant something automated system. Steve, do you have any idea?
No.
Cool. It
must be the zenith of the Tyrant program.
Right. I think that says a lot right there. This is Robo Tyrant. Steve, how do you feel about Robo Tyrant?
Crap. I would have replaced them, the entirety of this list, I would have replaced that with Abyss, specifically. Or even, what's the face from Dead Aim? I can't remember the name.
Morpheus. Yeah, that's obviously... The thing about this, doing tyrants, exactly, we had to try and avoid all grey area, so...
As a result, it's just a mechanized tyrant with a rocket launcher, and then it becomes a giant thing shooting blood lasers. Okay. This is the one where it feels most video gamey nonsense. I understand the idea, where it's basically meant to be, what if Nemesis was a perfected military weapon? I hate it. I think it's naff. There's something charmless about it. It seems sterile.
Yes, yeah. And not just by nature of being a robotic creature rather than something organic. It's just a boring boss fight as well, just a boring, frustrating boss fight.
A white metal thing in a white metal room shooting rockets at you that move at like a mile an hour. Okay. Great job, Umbrella.
Yes. Sure, how do you feel about the T-011?
It's just not good. It's Clone Wars Tyrant isn't. It's. I look at this creature and I just think This for me is a really, really good demonstration of just what happens. But if you want a better way to sum up Resident Evil has jumped the shark, I challenge you to find one than this type. The idea that this is a tyrant.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is. Like, at this point, this is so creative. It's interesting that they try to do something different. It's interesting that they try to kind of go, hey, let's take a tyrant, but let's do it in an interesting way where it can, more like a tank, or it's more like a gun platform or something along those lines. Let's do something different with a tyrant that isn't just a big scary white dude with a massive claw. Cool. The way that came about, the visuals of that, the gameplay, the presence it just doesn't have, it just feels bad. It just doesn't feel it. It's a real struggle to describe it as a tyrant, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, I mean, for that reason, it's probably the very dead bottom for me. It's even worse than goofy, wiggly arm tyrant, wiggly tentacle tyrant.
Yeah, blood lasers. It has blood lasers, or at least I think they're blood lasers. It's not really well explained.
I'm going to take that as a confirmation that it's the worst, to be honest.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, let's see if Umbrella Chronicles' other tyrant type fares any better. The Ivan, which is a choice of a name, or the Disco Tyrant, as I like to think them of, with their bizarre. I don't even know what's going on with these sort of coloured visors. These things are weird. Steve, how do you feel about Ivan?
I kind of really badly want to put some Daft Punk.
It was Daft Punk.
Tyrants, they annoy the living daylights out of me. Not only are they a chore to fight, they also, I feel like they sabotage the lore a bit. Like, they appear at a point when the tyrant isn't meant to be quite as sophisticated as it is, and they are beating the living daylights out of Wesker. Like, specifically in the Resident Evil 0 chapter, these are around.
Yes, good point.
And then future on, and I feel like we've got programmable tyrant buddy sidekicks here now, shattering the law, and they look ridiculous, and they have wibbly arm punches. Neat. Let's wreck the law even further by having a man who has magical clones and all this other crap. Yeah, no, I actually charitably will put it above the dead aim tyrant, but that's as far as it goes. Because there's something. I'm not one of these who gets too precious about lore, but the idea of the perfecting of building this bioweapon and then these appear previously in the timeline pisses me off, especially considering you've got RE0 goes out of its way to make a tyrant that's busted and broken compared to the original. To
really put the nail in that, the T-103 doesn't exist without the data of the T-002. Right, the data that it's is collected from the events of Resident Evil 1. So how does
it necessary if we've got them?
Exactly. What's the point of that when these already exist? Are these privately? Does Umbrella not know anything about these who were created for Vladimir specifically? Are they a secret? If so, how does that happen? It's a bizarre thing. And you're right. The twins from the Matrix tyrants they're just crap. They look stupid. Quite simply, I would not even put the middle of D. They're only slightly better than Gun Platform Tyrant, but not by much. Sherwin, where would you drop these pair of bozos?
I mean, I think at this point you have to consider. There's an interesting point, isn't there, with Resident Evil where it's not the same entity anymore. It ceases to be one thing, and at that point you have to take the continuity and the idea of a whole bunch of stuff that you've previously learned in games, because it's just been retconned to within an inch of its life and then just flopped to death anyway. And that these are that. They shouldn't exist in the grand scheme of things. They are absolutely put in because someone somewhere along the way went, I have a cool idea, let's do this thing. Doesn't matter, how you try to rationalize it. Doesn't matter how you try to discuss it as part of a law. Doesn't matter how you try to make it into anything beyond just saying this exists.
It's a gameplay device.
Pretty much it. Yeah, it's a gameplay device, and it's not a very good one. It's like the Spacemans from Horizon Forbidden West. It's just a poor design. It doesn't fit. It's not horror. It's not even really that fun. They just make you laugh like an idiot whenever you see them. They're just bad. There's nothing really good. I agree with you. In a weird way, T-109, for all its massive amount of flaws, is at least got a foot in horrific kind of what the hell is that thing? It's scary kind of thing.
Yeah.
These just are
two bouncers from a club. Yeah,
I'd put them below. I'd put them below the Clone Wars.
You piled up to close the wrong colour. You're not going in.
Yeah, exactly. Purely because whilst at least they try to do something different with Talos, that this creature is, or these creatures, I should say, they're just the same as the other tyrants. They're just kind of. We gave it, because we basically worked out, okay, so we're looking for a way to make our tyrant inconspicuous. So from one of them, they went, right, well, let's go to 1950s America and make sure it's got a hat. And then in this one, let's go to an East German rave and make sure they can fit in there.
Yep.
And that's literally it. Like, no, these are the bottom.
I'm inclined to go with that. Steve, are you happy with the dead bottom?
Yeah, get rid of them. Like, let's just,
Let's stop talking about them. So
yeah, let's never talk about them ever again. So our final tyrant to discuss is the unknown tyrant, the unnumbered tyrant, as it is. It appears in Resident Evil Damnation. An interesting one, this, sort of late in the timeline, but it's very clearly a tyrant. In fact, I believe it is the biggest it's one of the biggest monsters in the series. It's certainly the tallest tyrant, right? It's this huge, hulking thing that runs around and beats the crap out of lickers. Spoiler alert for when we eventually cover it. Resident Evil Damnation is a stinky, stinky turd. This scene with the tyrant is awesome. It's so good, and I love it. And also, whilst we're there, I've come across so many, at least until Remake 2, so many people who have done Tyrant cosplays, and this sort of like studded bracer thing that he's got on. That is always a look that people go for reasons. I don't know what's about that, but that's kind of cool, so I guess it's left some kind of impact. Sherwin, how do you feel about Unknown Tyrant?
It's just a tyrant. It's a T-103. It just has to be bigger.
It's just big.
There's not.
Yeah.
It's just big. Like, it's got a slightly different look. Cool. Like, it's bigger. Cool. Had more human growth hormone in it, I guess.
I mean, on the protein shakes and the taurine, he's doing pretty well, actually. Jim does that pure gym bit every week on Thursday.
Even that or a stretching.
There you go, job done. I mean, Steve Fritter sums it out quite nicely. It's cool. Like, it's. I'm not sure I agree with you about how awesome the scene is, but at least it has its own feel of character when it appears and it does its own bits. No matter how ridiculous the lickers are. I think it's, in that respect, it's certainly not D tier. I mean, I'll hold off on tier discussion for when you guys are there. I think there's not much to talk about this thing. It's a big T-103, which manages to have a bit of character, which is nice.
I think, I agree with that. And again, this is the same thing that Tyrant R has in its favour, in that you get to see it do what it was designed for in a way, which is fight other bioweapons. That's what makes it cool. And maybe that scene is only really cool because of all the, the hour that came before it or whatever. Steve, how do you feel about Big Boy?
I think it sells the concept of, like, if you put Talos up against this and said which one's the apex of the form, it's easily this one. Like, I think as a tyrant, a T-103 specifically perfected, I think it's pretty good. Like, it doesn't have much in the way of a character or any kind of presence outside the one scene where it kicks the living daylights out of some lickers, but by Jove does it do it so well. Like, I can believe the lore of its forebears and that they were trying to make an ultimate bioweapon when I see this thing behave. I don't think it's got, like, a great stage presence outside of that scene, as it's just literally, look at this giant frigging bloke mass some flipping long-tongued monsters around, but it does it really well. Unfortunately, if I had to give it some real negative marks, I actually don't like the design. I think the braces and stuff lead too far into power limiter lore for me.
Okay,
like, I'm very much in Sherwin's camp. I think limited coats is stupid, like rapidly brain dead. So other than that, it's pretty good. Like, as literally, if you said best tyrant on screen, I mean, it's not a hard contest, is it? And I'm stretching that definition to everything that looks even remotely like a tyrant on screen at the minute. That is easily the best one. Game-wise, obviously, he hasn't got one, so it doesn't really.
It's hard to, yeah.
I would love to fight one. Just saying, I would love to fight one. In real life, build one. I'll start with the tier talk. I think it's behind Nemesis. I think as the concept of best tyrant made, and let's be fair, we weren't exactly kind to Thanatos, Tyrant R 078. and yet we actually have something nice to say about this. I think bottom of B to me.
I'm not so hung up on of all the things in Resident Evil that do like the hat that I do get hung up on. I'm not so hung up on the power limiter thing. I don't mind if Nemesis is the leather daddy. I don't mind Sex Dungeon Tyrant. Here he is, if you like. You're right. In terms of the ultimate bioweapon, this guy literally runs rings around Talos and stuff like that. And it's interesting because from a perfected Tyrant point of view, I can certainly see where you're coming from, where you're talking about the placement. Is it more interesting than Tyrant R? I don't know about that. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Tyrant R without the rock and the claws. He's just got his coat on. You take that coat off, he's still got the granite skin, I bet.
Well, we don't know that, though, do we? We don't know. So I like the granite skin. Showen, where were you going to place this guy?
I think it's mid B.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I think it shows up. It looks awesome. Within the I should clarify this. Within the context of what it appears in, because if we're to rank these things in terms of like, you know, how they fit, like it's another D tier thing because it just doesn't fit into what I feel with Resident Evil in my head. It shows and it is and so on. But within context of what it is, it fits in quite nicely. It's got an awesome presence when it appears. It blows you away and kind of, wow, that's a cool scene, or it does some cool stuff. But you know, it feels scary. It feels like it's a barrier to the characters trying to get through life and so on. Ruins their day. And I think it has more. It manages to have character in what it does, and it feels like it actually is there for a purpose. And I think for that reason alone, it's not there because it needs to be there, aka Remake Nemesis. It's there because it actually justifies its inclusion. Yeah, and that puts it as a B. It's not as there's quite a big difference, I should say, between that and Hypnos, but it's better than Nemesis. It edges ahead.
Interesting. In that case, if that's the way you guys are going to swing it, do you know what? I think I probably would say that it's in the middle of B. Yeah, I think it is slightly better than Remake Nemesis, but I don't think by much. They're pretty level in that sense.
Yeah, I agree.
They're flawed.
They're running alongside each other.
Right, totally.
I look at it, and I agree with the decision. It's just the more I look at it, I feel like, if the regular Tyrant is a base RPG boss, that's like the raid version, the raid boss. We have to get people to fight him.
Yes.
In terms of aesthetic.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound too great now I think about it.
Bigger is better, etc. I don't know.
Yeah, he's just got bigger stats.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so let's go from the bottom up to the top and see if we are happy with our choices. So, is Ivan better than Talos? No, Ivan's the worst in my opinion. They're pretty interchangeable, but yeah, I would say Ivan's bottom.
If you were to show someone who didn't play Resident Evil games that, they'd laugh.
Yeah. There's no way they look at that and go, yeah, I could see that being in a Resident Evil game.
They wouldn't even think it's a boss. They just laughed. It looks goofy and stupid.
Yeah.
I love the image.
You think it was fan art.
I love the image because they're shaking hands.
Yeah, no, it looks like they're holding hands, doesn't it?
We got this, bro. We got this. We are the worst.
Talos, is it better than T-109? I don't think so.
They're both ridiculous, but this one has not the best gameplay. Steve sums it up really, really well. Just at that point, you can pause there, Steve. You've done it.
Its base form looks like a bloody Tau weapon or something, like from 40k. Like, that's not a Tyrant. That's just
it's a Clone Wars thing.
Yeah.
T-109 better than Thanatos? ? I don't think so. I think we're set on that.
No.
Cool. Thanatos better than Tyrant R? Again, I think pretty safe for that choice.
It's close. From a certain perspective, I like the way that Thanatos looks more distinct than what Tyrant R is, and that feels kind of cool.
I'm going to throw it out here that all the traits that make Tyrant R better than Thanatos, T-103 nicks in successor versions. Not necessarily the ones on this list, Dark Side Chronicles specifically, and that would be my argument for why Thanatos beats Tyrant R. Tyrant R actually has.
It maintains its own, like...
Yeah, it's unique.
That's fair.
Okay,
I think the thing that lets Thanatos down for me is that it's supposed to be the perfect tyrant made by someone who's just dissented away from the, made away from the umbrella thing, and then says, "Oh, this is not the best. I'm going to make the best tyrant ever," and it's the same as the normal tyrant.
Fair.
Like, it's just a different base subject.
Mine can swim.
But if you were to switch them over, I don't care. I think there's much for muchness for these two, to be honest.
Oh yeah, okay, I can do that. I can get behind that. In that case, are we happy with Tyrant R being in a C and T109 being a D? Is that enough of a distinction between those two?
Are you offering Tyrant R into D?
No, I guess the other way around more than anything. Is T109 worthy of dropping up, or is it just silly enough that it should stay down there with Disco Boys and whatever that thing is?
No, I definitely know. I could see the argument you could drop Tyrant R into D. I can't see the other way around. But for me, I think D is the truly ridiculous tier. And I don't think Tyrant R, for all of its flaws, isn't there. It's just a generic, we put a Tyrant in a game. Versus
okay.
D is like the absolute bottom bargain basement bin stuff of how did this even get past anybody.
Tyrant R also gets to show up in Umbrella Chronicles as well, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, he's Ada's boss after he's already been consumed by Nyx. He actually has his own little narrative breakthrough between the two games. There
you go. Thanatos. Is Thanatos better than T-078? I actually kind of think that maybe, because it just in terms of what you said about uniqueness and visual design, it's standing out a bit more. I like that element. Whilst 7.8's, functional, its design it's kind of inspired by its function. I actually think I like Thanatos just a tad better, but
as a unique being as opposed to the generic training dummy.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Especially considering that one has had a retread and one hasn't had a retread. That makes him just that little. Does that make sense?
I like for all the reasons I said, I like the presence of T-078 because it is just standardizing a tyrant, and I think there's something scary about that.
Yeah.
Where a tyrant becomes less than, oh my god, a tyrant is a really big deal to, oh no, tyrants are just a thing they have now.
I
think that's a thing. But at the same time, it's not a hill I'm happy to, I want to die on. So if you guys both still move Thanatos up.
Okay, this is where I'm at, okay, in the discussion. I'm right now seeing T78 as like, store brand cola. And then Thanatos is like, those luxury brands that did a few years ago. Like, Thanatos is like Coca-Cola with stevia. He's the gimmick special edition brand that is actually just about as good as the original brand anyway.
So how does that relate to this stevia?
I do like stevia, so
right, okay, that's what it is.
I used to drink that green Coke on the reg. So on that regard, I guess I'll take that over.
Yeah,
Bob Tyrant.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Thanatos. Is Thanatos better than Remake Nemesis? I feel like there's enough of a difference there.
There is that's where the tier break is.
Yeah, agreed. Remake Nemesis better than Unnumbered Damnation Tyrant? Maybe, but it's so tough.
It boils down to, like, Nemesis feels like he's been so leashed down in Remake.
I think it's a presence thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The potential would have been there, and he doesn't get to realise it.
Yeah.
I think its forms. You said it very well. It feels very video gamey. It just feels like a video game boss. It doesn't feel like it's got, and a bit like the B playthrough in Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's kind of there because it has to be there, not because there was an opportunity to do something really unique and interesting with Nemesis. It's kind of just there.
Okay. Is the Unknown Tyrant better than Hypnos T? Almost certainly not, in my opinion. Fantastic.
No, it's no. We're moving swiftly on from that.
Well,
Unknown Tyrant is like visually great, but has no literal any kind of weight to his lore behind him. Whereas Hypnos is mostly about it, like the whole either being a tyrant factory and literally murdering and maiming children, and the fact that the tyrant itself looks like an adolescent is basically built to be the best tyrant of the era. Yeah, no, I can believe that. Whereas it's just literally a unknown tyrant as this competition. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not being beaten.
I think maybe this is an argument for. It's certainly not going to put it above the Proto Tyrant, but maybe it puts it into tier A. Is every Tyrant after this, and including Hypnos, but hasn't been present in the ones before, feels like it's been designed to have a backstory, designed to have character, designed to have a presence, and designed to have something that makes it stand out and makes it unique in its own way, Hypnos included. And that, I even suspect, might put this into a bottom of tier A kind of story, because at least it feels like there's something about this Tyrant where it's pushed it up, it elevates it up into like a different class. So for that reason, I could see Hypnos creaking into A.
You know, any time that Survivor gets to earn some brownie points, you know, I'm all about it. So I'm happy to move it up to A. Steve, have you?
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Excellent. Okay, well in that case, is Hypnos better? Here we go. It's where the real discussions begin. Is Hypnos better than the Proto?
My favourite children are fighting.
Now respect your elders, Sonny. I came before you, and therefore I think T-001 is so naff it's good.
Yeah, I T1. I don't think I could switch these two over.
Yeah,
I don't. But that's mostly because I could happily put T-001 in the tier above. I am not objective here.
Okay, in that case, T-001, is it better than the classic T-002? For iconicness, as it were, alone, certainly not, but...
Specifically looking at the artwork we're using right now, one looks like you could probably put it on a render of a generic t-shirt, the other one you won't be able to get away with it. I feel like T-002 for being that more, you'd have to incorporate it into artwork to make it look cool, kind of wins for me. That is just the buffest of the tyrant. Of these tyrants left, it's the buff one. It's the himbo of the tyrant. But then we've got creaky old granddad tyrant, and there is endearingness to it. The fact that it's so knackered and busted, and it's still going for it. The thing that really annoys me about this is just getting to the weeds a minute. T-001 doesn't get a proper send-off. Like, in Zero, it just gets knocked out and disappears. And then Umbrella Chronicles, it just gets shot down and falls over. It doesn't do, like, the big rocket launcher finish. It's just like, oh, you know what, I'm too knackered, I'm going there. and it's out.
Yeah.
But that lack of big aplomb finish really harms it for me.
Well, it means it's still out there, much like Edward Dewey.
Yes, the deep lore of tier death experience.
It's stalking Billy Cohen in the woods.
Well, that's why Billy Cohen no one ever hears from him again, because literally the Tyrant gets him after all.
So, in that case, where are we landing on the placement of these two?
Again, I'm not objective. I could see this going up. I could see this better than that.
Steve?
Original Gangster versus the new hotness.
Which one is which? Like,
well,
this is totally the OG.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, I love both for different reasons. One for its like presence and sound design, and the other one for the fact that it's just huge. Oh God, I don't think hugeness quite sells it as a bioweapon, though, does it? Like, and the T-002 remake is a bit more athletic and arguably the poster boy Tyrant even now. Like.
Okay, from a horror,
okay.
Let's think of it from a different perspective. All right, and this is me trying to be objective. So, forgetting the design of them for a moment, from a horror perspective, so if you're forgetting obviously the console differences, because you can say which one looks best, whatever else, right? From a horror perspective, which one of these things is strong? Because they are both ultimately tyrants. The one is the crippled, flawed, much experimented on, kind of escaped/discarded, whatever its appropriate lore is, creature that Umbrella just, flogged into its existence, refused to die and just left it in a discarded heap somewhere, and is simply just roaming around this, monstrous killing machine. Or this vat-grown ultimate bioweapon that took all of the stuff you did from the first, and you go through the game and find out about, okay, something is here, this is what they were working on in the lab the entire time, and this is it. It's this uncontrollable machine that I let out, and then immediately murders the guy, let it out. and then that's what it is. And you basically got to kill it before it can kind of, I guess, achieve its true potential or properly awaken, whichever way you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. Which one of those two things, as a concept, is more terrifying? And I think the answer to that is probably what pushes where these two things lie.
Oh, okay.
Or you just go, do you know what? We'll keep T-002 Remake above it where it is, and this one can leapfrog up one.
See, what's funny about that is on the next choice, I was actually going to say that I've changed my mind. I think classic T-002 is actually better than the remake. So that really throws a spanner in my works, at least.
I was trying to think which one would have been the scarier one to meet in real life down a dark hallway. And then my brain went mechanically to, you've only fought one of these off with a knife successfully, and it's the remake one. So, therefore, its sheer killing potential, the PS1 version of the Tyrant is more deadly for Steve. Because, Remake Tyrant's got to turn his circle of a bus. I don't know if you know this, everybody. You could fight a guy with a knife easy.
Well, at this point, okay, well, let's perhaps move away from Proto Tyrant for a second, and perhaps this conversation should be, as you're suggesting, Steve, let's look at the Remake Tyrant versus OG Tyrant and go from there. Because I much like Si, I could happily switch those two over.
Yeah, it's
something I said.
You said earlier about T-103 and being imposing. The scene of the original game where the Tyrant steps down out of the tube.
Right, it's huge.
Just started into my head, and I'm like, that is still quite impactful today. So that is a big difference maker for me. So I would actually take Classic Tyrant over Remake. And as you said, Steve, Remake Tyrant, once you know what you're doing, maybe not so bad.
Ultimate bioweapon.
Take down by a knife.
Turn around every 3 hours. Like it's not. Ain't nothing. Don't get me wrong. I love the sound design. I actually do. Yeah. I dig its aesthetic look, compared to its counterparts. But there's something, like you said, about OG Tyrant's just sheer imposingness. And he's got like you said, when he gets out of the vat at the start, he's got like creepy stoop, and then just don't come this way.
You're right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
It's really neat.
So Classic Tyrant is now better than Remake Tyrant. What do we do about Proto Tyrant and Remake Tyrant, right?
Well, I think Proto Tyrant leaps that.
I think he does.
I can see that, and I'll say that because Proto Tyrant is more unique. Yeah. It's got that unique selling point of being crap in the best way, in the best. In the best possible way. It's got that unique selling point of being I'm silly, I'm broken as. All
right.
Go on.
I could keep going, but I've laid out my rationale for which one do you think of these things is most terrifying. Up to you guys now to make this final decision.
I'm quite happy with the what we've got. Actually, I think to be honest,
I think upgrades between 2 and 1 as in remake. The remake of the original Tyrant and then Zero's Tyrant. But again, it's not quite as cool as Hench Tyrant.
If I said Remake Tyrant had to get bumped down because you can beat it with a knife, for example, Proto Tyrant really can't be much higher because his boss fights are not exactly all that strenuous, are they? So
a faster turning circle, but that's it.
Yeah. Cool. In that case, Classic Tyrant, is it better than T-103 from RE2? I don't think so. Okay. T-103 Classic, is it better than Remake T-103? I think that is, again, we've made the right distinction there in terms of the tiers as well, because I think that is enough of a difference.
Can I make an argument for T-103 at least going up into S?
Oh, interesting.
Remake Tyrant doesn't really get an introduction, so much as just appears and kicks the living daylights out of it, which is terrifying. Bench press a helicopter, that's terrifying. The original version of Tyrant has its own scene and impactful sequence where you basically, if you play the original game, you know what's coming, so to speak. At least you have a vague idea, and then he appears down the corridor, much the same. But he has a little bit more of an intro, which gives him a little bit more of an edge, at least for me.
Also, his Super Tyrant is better.
Yeah.
Sherwin, what do you think about moving Classic 103 up?
I think the concept of what Classic T-103 is doing versus reality of what it's doing are two very different things. I think the way that T-103 appears in the game isn't that imposing. I don't ever remember a point where I was like, wow, this thing is here, it's scary. It was just kind of, oh, this weird looking thing is here. Like, it wasn't all that scary. Like, it wasn't obvious it was a tyrant from its design. It wasn't obvious that it was just a big dude who's chasing after me. Like, okay, it's kind of WWE.
Yeah.
With a steel chair. Wait, no, that's...
Yeah. Like, Nemesis and the T-103 in Remake evoke a sense of fear, evoke a sense of presence, evoke a sense of game-defining, game-changing existence with what they are.
Mm.
Yeah, when either of those two things turn up, okay, my entire game just became around avoiding being killed, getting away from these things, and trying, basically, I'm actually going out of my way, I'm thinking about, right, where's the next time I might see this thing? How do I avoid it when that happens? Irrespective of whether, as you were saying, Si, I know exactly where I'm going to encounter Nemesis. I know it's going to appear, standing on top of a building, shooting rockets at me. It's going to turn up here and smash a hydrant open and then chase me for a couple of rooms, whatever. You're still thinking about it in terms of how does Nemesis appear? How do I get away from this thing? And so on. And obviously, we talked about T-103 for the same reasons. I don't think you get that from the original version of T-103. By all means, it is definitely top of A. I don't think that's a question. I love what they introduced with it, and obviously it's a limitation of the system, but I just don't think it's defining enough. It's cool, it's just not that next level of game presence defining.
Yeah, this might be a bit around the houses and slightly irrelevant almost, but if Birkin was considered a tyrant, that's an S tier. And and the tyrant from RE2 is much lower. So for that kind of reason, that's probably why maybe it does stay down in A.
I mean, the Not Tyrants collection of Abyss and so on.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Probably take most of the D tier out, if not half a C.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I could see what you're saying.
Not tyrants. That's definitely what we're calling that episode.
Well,
No, I'm making fun and slow is funny. T-103 Remake. Is it better than Nemesis Classic? That's a really hard one, I think.
I love what they did with it. The thing that means it can never be better than Nemesis is the crap design of the Super Tyrant.
It's very true. All the Nemesis forms in the original game are really, really good. Really good.
I would literally say that there's a point of me which says that the one, without a doubt, I would put T-103 above Nemesis if it were not for that crap Super Tyrant design, and I feel like the reason why it's the strength of the gameplay of the remake of T-103 is what manages to keep it in S tier despite that bad design.
Yes. As we said when we were talking about this, it's got so many little flaws, hat included. Yeah, it definitely deserves to be punching up with Nemesis, but I agree.
Whereas Nemesis is just flawless.
Yeah,
just absolutely brilliant in execution.
Yep. Steve?
Okay, I feel like, that's an accept. I don't think Nemesis is the flawless god being. I don't know, but I can appreciate that there are more bogeys from it 103 remake than there are Nemesis in that regard. Nemesis does exactly what it's there for. It's a great stage presence. I think the only thing in terms of what Remake Tyrant has that Nemesis doesn't is the fact that he's more persistent. Throughout the RPD at least, he's a more persistent threat when he's there.
He's utterly terrifying. If you would say which is the scariest Tyrant on this list, it's T-103 Remake straight away.
See, I think out of all the Tyrants here, OG Nemesis may be the only Tyrant that's actually faster than the player character when you're running away from it, bar a classic Tyrant charge. He's the only one who can outpace you. He can literally just pulverize the living daylights out of you if you're not ready for it. Whereas most of them, if you're at least a competent player, you shouldn't have too much trouble. Let's be real. You play these Resident Evil games at least once or twice, whereas Nemesis requires you to actually get really good, or you are tanking healing knives and hits. Yes. It requires a little bit more of the player than every other one of these Tyrants, I think.
Nemesis is one of those things where outside of the boss fights, taking him down and getting the rewards for it is a point of honor, to be honest, because it's not easy, especially for new players. Yeah, definitely that as well. I think I'm pretty happy with what we got in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah. Well,
so our honourable mentions are Tyrant C
from Outbreak, Cold Tyrant. Is there anything else?
I was going to wonder technically, are the two that appear in RE4, the pair of them, one in the black jacket, one in the red jacket, are they technically Tyrants?
Tyrants in RE4.
Your brain's going. Oh, you mean Verdugos?
Yeah.
God.
I guess
if we're adding Verdugos to not Tyrant Collection, they're an S tier already.
they're made by the Plagas, right? So I assume. So I don't think that counts, unfortunately. When you say two Tyrants, though, Gaiden as well. That's Tyrants, right?
Does Gaiden have Tyrants? It's got the mutant at the end. No, there is a technically.
It gets kind of a Tyrant, or at least it looks like one. We don't really have much more.
It's an unknown BOW is what it is.
Right.
I think it's how it's described. So it's not technically a Tyrant.
But also a Tyrant. I mean, this whole body matter replication thing.
Yeah.
What we absolutely are forgetting that is a Tyrant is, of course, the Tyrant from Resident Evil the stage.
The Gomez Tyrant.
No, to be fair, you know, no word of a friggin' lie. That fight scene was pretty neat for a stage play.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to have a picture of that, and I don't know if this
I can do that.
I feel
Tyrant C, you have been replaced with Stage Tyrant. And you are the top.
Or S for stage.
That guy really, or whoever it was in the costume, really put all their all into that. You can tell the slow motion stuff, like they really cared. So I appreciate that.
He goes into top of B. I could see that.
I think it literally is like something akin to the Unknown Tyrant's outfit, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it is the same thing. Yeah,
it's the first appearance of the Unknown Tyrant.
Yeah, it's the same guy. Cool. Well, with all that being said, that is our ranking of, as far as we'll say, the sort of canonical non-grey area of Tyrants, at least. Let us know what you thought of this down in the comments below, what your ranking would be, what did we get horribly wrong, what in D tier should be an S tier, and vice versa. And, of course, make sure you subscribe and support us on Patreon, where you can see episodes of Tier Death Experience and a whole lot of other stuff we do early as well. Thank you, Steve, thank you, Sherwin, for joining me for another wonderful episode. And, of course, have a good week.